We had General Narwane, we had ADR's chief, we had Dr. Partha Sen, we had other persons, eminent personalities delivering this talk in our conversation with media series. And we relaunched it last month. The first one was held at IIC, and May is the turn of Press Club of India to host it. So we had Ashok Lavasa last month at IIC. This time we have Mr. Damodaran, former chief of SEBI. I will introduce the speakers, and then Mr. Suhas, Borker, Moderator, will take over. Mr. N. Damodaran was born the same year as India got independence, in the month of May. So, before independence, the same year I said. And he did his completing his pre-university in Loyola College, Chennai. He spent a little over 2 years at IIT Madras. He graduated in economics and law from the universities of Madras and Delhi. After 6 months each as a probationary officer in Indian Bank and State Bank of India, he joined the IAS 1971 batch in Tripura, where he served in different developmental and regulatory positions. He was also appointed Tripura's Chief Secretary in 1992. He also served as Joint Secretary in the INB Ministry. In 2001, he was appointed the Chairman of UTI to rescue India's largest and oldest investment institution, which had collapsed. He was simultaneously given charge of IDBI, another of India's major financial institutions. As chairman of SEBI, he brought corporate governance practices to India's securities market. While at SEBI, he was elected chairman of the Emerging Markets Committee of the International Organization of Securities Commissions, a position he held till he terminated office as chairman of SEBI. He chaired the Government of India Constituted Committee for recommendations to scale up PEVC investments in India and to streamline regulations thereof. He also chaired the Government of India Constituted Task Force for Setting Up Resolution Corporation of India. He was the chairman of Ministry of Corporate Affairs Committee for reforming the regulatory environment for doing business in India and chairman of Reserve Bank of India's Committee on Customer Service in Banks. He was the founder chairman of the Society and Board of Governors of the Indian Institute of Management, Tiruchirappalli. Today's moderator is Mr. Suhas Borker. He is a documentary filmmaker, journalist, media personality, and also civil rights activist. And he has 3 civil services initiatives going on for the past 4 decades. Working Group on Alternative Strategies, Jan Prasad and Green Circle of Delhi. He also launched Citizen First CFTV way back in 1980. And he has served as executive member of IIC and is also elected trustee of IIC. So I hand it over to Mr. Suhas Borker, and we were expecting Director IIC, Mr. Shrivastava, to be here, but our President, Mr. Gautam Lahiri, President of PCI, is here. So I request him to give a brief welcome address before Mr. Suhas Borker takes over.
Well, thank you very much. Well, on this subject, actually, I am here to listen to Mr. Damodaran, like all of you. I find in the audience also there are many former journalists who used to cover finance, and also I see one of the Mr. Subramanian, perhaps I have covered him during my reporting. And thank you very much all of you coming here. This subject is interesting, no doubt. It's a contemporary because we are all curious about these days how the corporate bodies are funding the political parties, particularly during the election time. And corporates were funding to political parties, I think, since when the elections start. But point is, the question is now being raised that there is no transparency in the funding, as it was evidently clear that when the present government introduced the electoral bond, and there was no transparency, Supreme Court struck down that scheme. Then after that we found that how the ruling party normally gets the benefit of all the corporate funding. listed in the perhaps SEBI. I think Mr. Damodaran will be able to enlighten us. They also funded political parties. And those companies were in red. And after this, suddenly, there was a quick protocol. We found that many of them got some contracts, government contracts. Not from only the central government, also from some of the state governments too. So there should be some kind of a transparency. There is no quick fix solution how this can be transparent. But I think as a former bureaucrat who handles this subject, he had a lot of experience. What particularly when he was heading SEBI and UTI, he must be knowing how this funding goes from the corporate bodies to political parties and what should be. Rather, I would rather prefer to listen that what could be the solution for transparency in political or by political funding by the corporates and the political parties. So thank you all. I will not, again I will repeat, thank you all and I welcome Mr. Damodaran. We are greatly privileged that the Club of India is having a former persons like him here. Earlier also we had many personalities which I want to inform many of those who are also not members perhaps. That regularly we hold this kind of program in the Press Club. The Press Club of India is merely not a water hole. We are trying to build it as an institution. Definitely we raise our voice for media rights, media freedom, as well as we discuss about social contemporary issues. And also we have a very good program of a monthly program of a discussion on newly launched books. So these things are happening. Many foreign countries, diplomats are showing interest. They are coming into the club. So I hope that all of you should see that this club should remain as an independent body. That's our art from the members. From the members of the Press Club, they feel that everybody will support the cause of Press Club of India. Thank you very much and thanks Suhas for organizing this consecutively for 2 years. A great applause to IIC also that they felt glad that they are associated with the Press Club of India. So I think that this conversation will continue in future too. Thank you very much.
Gautam, and thank you, Vinay. So, without further ado, I think I request Damodaran to give his opening remarks for about 15 minutes, and then we have a short dialogue with the moderator and the speaker, and then we'll open it to the house. When we were discussing, who should be speaking in May, we could find a better person than Damodaran to speak on this issue because after the Supreme Court declared the electoral bond scheme as unconstitutional, we thought this was a very relevant thing, and yet with the general elections going on and the result, whatever, but this issue is going to be of some primacy.
Evening, but it's so hot that it seems like afternoon and tea at this point of time. Thank you for taking the time out, and I hope when we are done and dusted with this discussion, this conversation, maybe I will be certainly wiser as to what I should have known before I started speaking. So with that caveat, let me get started. Let me also say this, that nothing of what I say has any political party overtones. For the simple reason that I worked in government for close to 4 decades. I've been working outside thereafter for more than a decade. And I have at no point of time been associated with any political party. Not with any political party, not with any political party persons. Of course, along the way, one did pay the price for what is called political neutrality, but a price worth paying, if you ask me, for sleeping peacefully at night. So when I mentioned to a colleague of mine this morning that I was coming to speak here, these days, and she's much younger than I am, these days youngsters are very soft. She said, okay, disappeared and came back after 10 minutes with something that I'm going to use now. She says, yesterday, the Harvard Law School Forum on Corporate Governance has written something which you might find interesting. This as recent as yesterday. And I crave your indulgence to read a paragraph of what they have written. Ordinarily, I don't like reading texts, particularly if they come from the United States, but this is topically relevant, therefore I'll make an exception. I'm quoting from the report. Over the past year, several corporate executives have expressed a concern to the Center of Political Accountability that the new members of corporate boards often lack a broad knowledge of corporate political spending and what it entails. They see it as impairing new directors' ability to set political spending policies and conduct the due diligence required to protect their company, especially in today's risk-fraught political environment. I thought this applies almost entirely to the situation we have in India today. Directors who do not know what to do with this subject, when it comes to the board, if it comes to the board, do they ask questions, do they ask the right questions on how corporates are proposing to fund political parties? Let's begin at the beginning. We cannot pretend that elections in this country will go on without funding the corporates. Suppose you just turn off that tap and say that there will be starting tomorrow morning. Tomorrow morning is a little late, you've had 5 phases already, but if you roll back a little bit, you say at the beginning of the electoral process, somebody enacted a law that says no political funding. Some persons will be very happy because there is a kind of negativity attached to the relationship between corporate funding and the functioning of parties, or the function of quid pro quo. It can't be wished away, it is there. But these entities that fund political parties are also corporate citizens. And as corporate citizens, they have a responsibility to ensure that the ecosystem of which they are a part is reasonably sound and stable. Supposing money did not come from the corporates, where did it come from? Those that are very rich, have deep pockets, have family fortunes, will be at a huge advantage vis-a-vis the principled, well-intentioned young man or woman who wants to stake his claim and who has no resources to do so. So some of that tends to get addressed if there is external funding. Lots of difficulties involved with that. Elections are expensive business. I think all of us know that, especially people in the press who keep saying this up close and personal will be in a position to appreciate how electoral spending, all related spending has increased over the elections. As was mentioned, I was born in the year of independence, so I have voted in several elections. I've conducted several elections. And the one thing that I have seen is that every election you find more spending than there has been in the previous election. At the candidate level, at the party level, and what was at what other level, not even getting there. And then we have some limits that the Election Commission has laid down. In this day and age, those limits are laughable. And let me mention to you what they are. In the context of the elections in Andhra Pradesh, the Election Commission sent out a circular that said each assembly candidate can spend up to 40 lakh rupees. This 40 lakh rupees is from nomination till the electoral process is complete. And as you know, there are several stages. It's a long process. For Lok Sabha candidates, it said the limit was 95 lakhs, less than a crore rupees. I think today crore is the unit in which discussions are taking place. When I was growing up, that unit used to be 100 and then 1,000. it is crores, several hundred crores, and we heard about billions, now we go to billions and trillions. So it's a changed scenario. And these limits are expected to operate in that scenario and deliver a clean, transparent election process. There's no harm wishing that it does so. I don't want to go down that path. But before we come to corporate funding, there are 2 or 3 things I wanted to mention. And I'm looking at this subject through the lens of the corporates and the lens of corporate governance. Not so much the receiving party, which is a political party that receives money. I'm looking at it from the point of view of the giver, the one that's actually making the contribution. In the world of corporate governance, there are 2 things that are very important. Transparency was mentioned. Transparency and disclosure. We live in a disclosure-based regime where anything that stakeholders need to know has to be disclosed in clear fashion, no obfuscation, no incompleteness. You have to tell the full story and you have to tell it in a manner that the person for whom it is intended understands. So transparency and disclosure are important. Conflict of interest is something that needs to be rooted out. If conflict of interest exists in a corporate organization, then clearly there are some problems which will surface sooner rather than later, and then all stakeholders will pay the price, not just the promoters, not just the management. And quid pro quo was mentioned. And there is this feeling that everyone that is giving contribution to political parties is expecting something in return. And that's the essence of conflict. That quid pro quo, that demand that yes, I will give you something if I can get something either up front or later if you believe the commitment. That is, if you believe the commitment. I saw a cartoon recently, an interesting cartoon. So there was little Dennis with his back to the tree. And there was his friend on the other side, and she asked him, do all stories start with once upon a time? And Dennis put her wise and said, no. Some stories start with if I get elected. So, it's a contextual observation. So, if you believe, what the instrumentality is. You can wish away electrons. They have their advantages, there are clearly disadvantages, and the Supreme Court ruled that they didn't measure up, they didn't tick all the boxes required to ensure a clean election. So what happened leading up to that? The 2013 Act had some restrictions, Companies Act, on which companies could donate to political parties. You had to be a company in existence for 3 years, couldn't donate otherwise. The reason being that what you give was relatable to your profits for the 3 years. So if you weren't in position for 3 years, clearly you are not going to be able to show profits for 3 years. The second was that it had to be a percentage of your net profits. Initially, before the 2013 Act, it was 5%. After that, it was discontinued for a while. In fact, it's had its twists and turns. In the Supreme Court judgment, you will get the entire history of how this moved back and forth. And the 2013 Act said, okay, 7.5% is the ceiling of what a company which is in existence for 3 years can give to political parties. The whole corpus. Not that you give 7.5 to each political party, then if you have more than 10 parties, you won't have money left for anything else. So this is the sum total of what you could give. And I'm coming to apportionment in a minute. How do you distribute that? Now, 2017, the then finance minister, in a move ostensibly to do away with the difficulties of the 2013 Act and encourage the funding of elections, brought in an amendment which did away with provisions of 5 enactments. Companies Act, the Income Tax Act, the RBI Act, the FCRA, and the Representation of People Act. So with that one act, the relevant provisions of all these were opt out. And as far as the Companies Act is concerned, what did it do? Existence for 3 years disappeared. We didn't need it. The ceiling of 7.5% disappeared. And there were a few other risk returns which made it very easy for companies which wanted to favor one or more political parties, notwithstanding their existence, notwithstanding their profitability, notwithstanding several other things, you could write out checks and give them your contribution. And then, of course, electoral bonds came alongside that, which doesn't exist today. What the Supreme Court judgment did was to knock out all these amendments made in 2017 and to restore the provisions that existed earlier. So as we speak today, the 7.5% ceiling is back, post the judgment of the Supreme Court. Several other restrictions which were there were removed in 2017 are also back. So we are back in a sense to the pre-2017 regime. Now how does this work out? And I will tell you from what I have seen and heard in boardrooms. I do some advisory work for corporate boards. I sit on boards, I have sat on boards till very recently, till they realized that I was not as young as they or I thought I was, and then they didn't show me the door, but they showed me the law. It said that you can't continue in working. So I had to leave and putting it in a manner in which it looks like I was wanting to stay. No, I was not. So my experience is direct. What happens in boardrooms and how are directors sensitized to this particular demand? First thing, you have a recorded board meeting. The minute the discussion starts on this subject, somebody says, are we having a recording on? Let's switch it off. Okay, so the recording goes off. I'm giving you the details of how it operates at the end of the given. Then somebody in management, the promoter, whoever says, such and such political party has asked us to give X crores. How was that number determined? Before the Supreme Court judgment, it was arbitrary. And no number was ordinarily for big company less than 100 crores. So we would ask for 100 crores. It doesn't matter what your profitability was because the 2017 Act took care of that. So that one bit of information would be placed before the board. There would be hardly any discussions. There would be hardly any application of mind at the individual level or the collective level. And a decision would be taken, suitably worded, that in suitable tranches, an amount not exceeding X. And what is that amount? It is the amount that was said to be demanded by the political party concerned. Nobody asks and nobody is told how many political parties are opposed to. The board doesn't ask this question, the board is not told this question. So much for transparency and disclosure. Right? We are only told that this one party, which is the party, approached us, and it looks like if we don't agree, if we don't offer this money, there could be issues for us going forward, which proposal to refer to. And this is stated in very general terms with unsuspecting board. No one pushes back and says, but did you tell them that you can't give this money, that you don't have this money? You don't get satisfactory answers for this. When I'm telling you what happens inside boardrooms, it's important. And why we need to clean up this way? Where will the cleaning up come? I think it's important for boards to be told, and if they're not told, ask that they be told how many political parties approached you for contribution. How much did each of them ask you? What is the total corpus that you can provide to all of them put together? Going by the 7.5% cap and your profitability. Then the question comes, and this is an important question, how do you distribute it among those parties? Do you give it only to the ruling party? Do you give it to the ruling party and the principal opposition? If you are a Delhi-based party, do you also say, I have a branch in Mumbai and therefore I need to look after the locally relevant political party, give something, but then you forget about Andhra Pradesh and Telangana and Tamil Nadu, whatever, because you are not present there, and yet they are all contesting for the Lok Sabha elections. So most people don't want to take that decision. It's a tough decision to take. How much of this corpus do you give to you, assuming there is a demand? So then comes the question of electoral trusts. So the electoral trust is a place where your corpus is parked, and in accordance with certain predetermined formula, they make available the money to different political parties. But that formula has to be predetermined. It cannot be that halfway through a game of football you change the rules. It can't be that. It has to be predetermined and inflexible. And this trust has to be run by people who have credibility, who have respectability, who are not identified with political parties. Grey eminences, as we call them, they are the ones that need to actually be in charge of this distribution, which is a critical element of this entire process. Because it doesn't matter what the corpus is, the question is who gets how much. That is going to be something that is critical. There are electoral trusts, but these electoral trusts are now my trust, your trust, their trust. It is not the electoral trust to which we give it money. So the people that are actually managing those, their political and ideological compulsions, their preferences will clearly influence where that money goes, and you claim you're giving it to a trust, you don't know where that is going. Now what is the alternative? My dear friend Yakub Qureshi, former Chief Election Commissioner, I'm happy to see Suhu here in the audience. Suhu is an expert. So is Qureshi. He has written several articles suggesting several alternatives. To collect the money, give 100 rupees per vote cast as the parameter for determining who should get how much, which party. 100 rupees for every vote cast in favor of the party. And he's done some arithmetic to show that it doesn't cost a ton of money, if that is the way to vote. There is a flip side. What happens if there is a new party? It hasn't had anyone cast votes for it. Will you shut it down? You've got to then carve out some separate mechanism to address those, but that will be a minor part of the overall package which you can design. The other thing is, he spoke about the National Election Fund. Anyone can contribute to the fund, and the authorities of that fund will then decide where it will be distributed. I don't want to elaborate on any of those. These are all very welcome suggestions. In fact, he said also that 1 paise levy for every liter of petrol sold can finance the elections several times over, if you do that. And hopefully 1 paise per liter will not pinch anyone too much. Because we pay several other kinds of sets at a much higher level. This will just get merged in that totality of payments. I have another suggestion, since friends from the press are here, and I want that this gets out to the extent possible, which is, we have a scheme called the MP Lads scheme, if you are aware of it, where each MP gets 5 crore rupees per year. So we take 750 MP, both houses together, multiply by 5 crores, multiply by 5 years, and divide it on then you have 4,000 plus people at the state level, the MLAs and the MLCs. Some of them get 5, some get 2.5, some get 1. You take an average of 2.5, you discover that's also a huge number because it is 4,000 into 2.5 into 5, not a small number. You don't need all that money. During COVID, the political parties agreed on not making that money available to the MPs and MLAs and to give that for the national COVID effort. My point is simple. Elections are also important. Fighting COVID is certainly important. I don't think the elections are unimportant. Why not we use that? I have an additional point, but I will be flying in the face of a Supreme Court judgment. Chief Justice K.G. Balakrishnan upheld the validity of the MP life scheme. I personally think that it violates the principle of separation of powers. And Mr. Veerappa Moili, who headed the Administrative Reforms Commission, also felt it was a terrible idea and needed to describe the MP life scheme. I'm hoping someday somebody in the Supreme Court will revisit that and see that there are patent absurdities because it creates an unequal playing field. If I am a sitting MP and over 5 years I got 25 crores to put up bus stands, libraries, reading rooms, whatever, and my opponents who are not sitting MPs haven't got that money, we start with a non-legal play. And I don't think we should do anything to perpetuate that system of a non-legal play. So the important thing is political parties must get money whether from individuals or corporates. The boards should apply their mind as to how much each board can give, each company can give, and in what manner and who takes care of the distribution. And most importantly, I think we should ensure that there is you can't have an absolute level playing field, but to the extent possible, level the playing field so that every person who has aspirations of serving this great country is enabled to get started on that process and is not starved of funds in order to contribute to the nation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Damodaran, for that overview. Actually, just a side that when we were requesting him to come here, he said when I was the JS-INB, he was an honorary member of the club. And
Misplaced that
he wanted to waive it today. So I think Gautam should revive that, the old friends.
Really, my successor at abolition scheme.
So you successor to
I don't give it abolition. No honorarium.
And the interesting part was, I don't want to name the junction, but he also told me that as the JSC got it, but the secretary didn't get it. So there was a kind of a ticklish thing built in the ministry also. Because the press club gave it to the JSC. Anyway, that aside. Now, taking the cue from the overview, the first thing I wanted to ask you was, being the chair of SEBI, that's how that whole thing about insider trading and everything was opened up. We had a lot of issues earlier. So now, cannot some kind of a regulator be brought into corporate funding? I mean, that's the first question which I would like to put in. And how how will that scenario operate? I mean, you mentioned about the boards and everything. Yes.
If you want to complicate an existing problem, bring in a regulator. I don't think bringing in a regulator is the best solution because you might get regulators that don't understand ground realities and therefore write regulations every time they wake up in the morning. The lighter side was asked post-2008. I ceased being a regulator. I left before the crisis. Somebody asked me, what do you do if regulators every day write new regulations? And that was happening not in India. Across geographies and across different segments of the financial sector. People were writing new regulations as if their lives depended on it. Because it was a question of self-preservation, self-justification, and defense mechanism to say, we do exist and therefore we are writing these regulations. I mentioned to the guy that asked me, figure out when the regulator is waking up in the morning, wake up 2 hours earlier, at least for 2 hours, you will be governed by SEBI regulations. That's the only advice I can give you, otherwise there is no guarantee that no regulations will be made. The answer doesn't lie in regulation. The answer lies in everyone who is involved in the process. Understanding that, look, you need to have absence of conflict of interest. This expectation that I will give something to the electoral process in order to get something for my area, my constituency, my company, that is something that should be discouraged, and no regulator can do it. I think it's only public perception and it's only public influence that will do it over time. It won't happen overnight. There have been cases where it is very obvious that there is quid pro quo involved. The only person that admitted quid pro quo in our history was the late Anthony for the cement allocation. Did receive donations, and he seemed to justify it in some sense, but nobody else had the courage to, even though quid pro quo is continuing on a regular basis. In fact, people that don't understand where these three words come from, which language they also use quid pro quo. So it's part of common vocabulary. So I think the answer is that you need to avoid conflicts. You need to avoid, and you said about insider trading, you need to avoid, to the extent possible, asymmetry of information. These are what I call the terrible twins in the space of governance. You should root out conflict of interest, you should minimize asymmetry of information from both. There will always be people that have information faster, that have more information, that have qualitatively better information. But you need to reduce it to the extent possible by erecting what are the safeguards. Will that address the question that, shall we say, corporate funding without funding of political parties, without any guidelines, without any provisions of law, will that improve it? But you don't need a regulator to do that. So long as there are ceilings that are prescribed, so long as there are conditions precedent to the contributions being made, and so long as there is the watchful stakeholder community, and where the media is very, very observant and makes the right comments, some of that will get addressed. After all, political parties are not in this business for short-term gains. They too are looking at long-term existence and how they can continue to be in existence. Companies also would want to be around for a long time. It is not that I make some money today, so tomorrow and the company can go well. It can't do that. Make it difficult. I'm not saying name and shame, but certainly point fingers at those that are stepping out of line to do things that are clearly, obviously wrong. You can't have an exact definition of what is right. I'll give you an example of CSR, right? Don't want to divert from this topic, but if somebody is constructing a road leading to his factory, the CSR criteria said that shouldn't be counted. Then people said that, there are others who are using this road. They are also benefiting, not just me. Therefore, why can't I have? So there are interpretational issues, there are various shades in this. But the question is, and I always believe this to be a general principle, don't try and catch everyone who violates what you think is a law or regulation. Catch the top 5 or 10 persons. Go after them. Make an example. Don't bother about the small guys. That's a waste of time. If they find big guys are getting caught, the small guys will follow you and you don't need to go after. But the regulator is not. one more regulator. There's no shortage of regulators this country. I always believe better regulation, less regulators. That I think is what we need.
But just coming back to the same point, I mean, can we think of a scenario without SEBI? You know, so, I mean, it's working to some extent. It is definitely. So, I mean, why reverse to the bringing in? I mean, you talk of. I mean, you mentioned about an electoral trust. And then you think of people who will be above board, who will be sitting on that, and they act as filters. You know, so the money goes to the right people. So the same way, can we? I mean, a regulator also operates on those lines of a trust. You know? So
See, the regulator has a lot of routine work, has to deal with the here and now. The kind of people I'm talking about are those who are well past their active years, but have over the years gained some credibility, the elder statesmen of the community, people that are well informed, people that are knowledgeable, and people that are not scared to take a decision because at that stage in life they're not worried about the consequences. You need to get that kind of people. There are some retired Supreme Court judges who take that box. I'm sure there could be several others who take that box. So, fairly evident. I wouldn't look for someone who has his or her life ahead of them because the presumption would be that they can get compromised. Presumption may not be the reality. Young people would be raised as principle, but they would suffer from that presumption. So get some people who are older, wiser, people who, as they say, don't need a comb in law. That kind of people.
Yeah, but you know, going back to a little bit in the past, we had the instance of you know, Raja Gopalachari writing to J.R.D. Tata for a contribution to the new party he was launching, the Swatantatra Party. And promptly J.R.D. wrote to Nehru that, you know, the Raja Gopalachari has asked for a contribution, and I think it is in the democratic polity interest that we give them also. And then Nehru said, you can do what you want, but they're not going to get many seats. Anyway, that's another story. But what I'm just saying is that those were different times, you know. And now it's, I mean, I grab your pocket and I clean your pocket, you know. So in this kind of a scenario, will this electoral trust work? I just want to put it to you.
It will. It will. In fact, if you don't have too many trusts, if you don't have too many trusts, so if you have the right people manning the trusts, I think it's possible. Is that a guarantee that it will work every time? Maybe it will fail, but we are looking at where we are now, what we can do to improve matters. To my mind, that is a way. Since you mentioned Rajagopalachari, I'm sure friends from the press might know of this, and he was the Chief Minister of Madras, and he was in favor of prohibition. One of his Chettiar friends was having permits, but he was also financial part. So he asked for an increase in his quota. Now, Rajaji was with two minds. Here was his friend who looked like desperately needed to get a higher quota, and at the same time he was the votary of prohibition, evangelist for prohibition. So the man who used to clear all his papers within a few minutes, kept that paper with him for 2-3 days because he wanted to know what to write. And then he wrote on that, let him drink and die. So the guy that received it interpreted it as, you need to up the guy's quota, Chettiar's quota, but the chief minister was still frowning at the lawyers call it harmonious construction.
थैंक यू वेरी मच सर, आपने बड़ा अच्छा कंटेंट जो है वो बताया, उनकी समझ में आ गया। जैसे सर ने भी पूछा है, तो ये जो नेशनल इलेक्शन फंड की आपने बात कही है, इसका होना एक अनिवार्य सा लगता है, जरूरी लगता है। और इसके लिए पॉलिटिकल ना होके अगर सेक्रेटरी फाइनेंस, होम, डिफेंस कोई भी उनका काउंसिल बन जाए और सुप्रीम कोर्ट के कोई जज जो है वो उसको मॉनिटर करे, तो ये नेशनल फंड तो हमें समझ में आ गया। तो इसका एक हम ये पूछ रहे हैं, क्या ये हो सकता है? दूसरी बात जो है, जब पॉलिटिकल पार्टी रिकॉग्नाइज होती है तो चीफ इलेक्शन कमीशन एक, जैसे कंपनी लॉ में मेमोरेंडम ऑफ एसोसिएशन होता है, एक आर्टिकल ऑफ एसोसिएशन, ये उनको देना जरूरी होना चाहिए। जब कंपनी लॉ एक छोटा सा कंपनी है और आप एक बड़ी भारी पार्टी बना रहे हैं, तो आपके पास कोई मेमोरेंडम ऑफ एसोसिएशन, आप क्या करना चाहते हैं वो मेमोरेंडम में लिखिए, और आप कैसे करेंगे वो आर्टिकल ऑफ एसोसिएशन। तो ये दोनों क्या संभव है? और इसमें जो जैसे सर ने बोला कि रेगुलेटर होना चाहिए, मैं इसको रेगुलेटर ना कह के एक नेशनल फंड अथॉरिटी, जैसे आपने बहुत सारी अथॉरिटी बना रखी है, तो नेशनल फंड अथॉरिटी भी हो सकती है कि नहीं? ये 2-3 क्वेश्चन अगर आप मुझे समझा दें तो बड़ी मेहरबानी। सर एक छोटा सा पॉइंट, एक, अच्छा, अरे सर
Shall I go ahead?
Yeah.
Mr. Damodaran, you talked about Harvard law, that study. There was a study by the Harvard Business Review 2 years ago on corporate donations to political parties. Now that took the view, and of course they were looking completely at the American context. They took the view that corporate donations should be completely eliminated. The fact being, the rationale being that investors, stakeholders in the party, in the company, were not aware of what the company was doing. Your board is taking the decision, but are you asking the stakeholders? Are you asking the investors and the shareholders? So who is taking the decision? Just the people at the top. The company is comprised of so many people, so many stakeholders. So it's not an individual. I just take a decision, I like this political party. And if you will recall, Kiran Mazumdar-Shaw pointed out when she about a donation, she said, I have made it in my personal capacity. It was not her firm.
I know, I sit on Kiran's board.
Yeah. So, I mean, you have talked about a national election fund, electoral trusts, or taking 1% cess, which are all excellent ideas. In all those, especially on the cess, those are ideas where you are raising funds without going to the corporates. So can we have a system without having corporate donations, where again the situation of conflict of interest then is ruled out? Individuals can donate, plus you can take the cess if you like.
Absolutely. If you can actually raise enough money through the National Election Fund, or by assess, or by any other manner, without recourse to corporate donations, you can certainly run the elections. The point is that historically, business and politics have had a relationship. If you go back several years, some of our most respected political leaders had close relationships with business houses. The difference is, and I am differentiating business and corporate. Corporate is a structured entity. A businessman is an individual with deep pockets possibly, and therefore he or she can fund it. As Kiran said, I will write out checks on my own, leave my company, it doesn't matter. So you can have that, but you can't have a complete, shall we say, break between corporates and the political process, because at the end of the day, corporates are also stakeholders in our political system. The point is, how do you ensure that they contribute to the process other stakeholders and say, I've got this demand, what do you guys think I should do? It won't work that way. The board is the repository of the interests of the stakeholders. That's a presumption. Whether it works that way or not, you can have variations. But because the board is actually empowered to act on behalf of the stakeholders, the board takes those decisions. My worry is that the board should do its job. If the board did its job properly, they will be reflecting the interests of all those other people who are outside, who are not actively a part of the process. Because the board is then thinking of it from the point of view of the company, and what is the company? It's a collection of the stakeholders' interests. That is what the company is about. So I think there is much to be said for an election fund. Again, once you introduce it, if that runs into any problems, then you need to have plan B. Are we then going back to the present system of reaching out directly to the corporates? Or do we want a halfway house? Most companies, most organizations do pilot projects. You want a halfway house where you say, okay, 50% we will give you fund, the rest let the corporates fund. There are variations of this theme that you can.
Conflict of interest arises.
No, conflict will arise only if there is a benefit that is directly relatable to this particular contribution that you make. Now that will happen if I give it to a political party which is in government and which can favor it. If it goes into the corpus, you don't know whose money is going where. You're contributing to the corpus, and the people that administer the corpus, on the basis of certain predetermined formula, then distribute. Qureshi said it should be on the basis of 100 rupees per broadcast, but there are several other formulations you can look at it on that basis. The questions that you asked two questions. Unfortunately, as our friend reminded you, was born before independence, memory is not as good as it should be. Briefly remind me and I will answer your questions. They're very good questions. I need to answer them. नहीं बता रहा। Tell me आपका question repeat कर दीजिए।
आप अपना क्वेश्चन रिपीट।
अच्छा,
हाँ।
नेशनल इलेक्शन फंड के बारे में आपने
आप
कहा,
अथॉरिटी का बता रहे हैं। Create an authority, not a
एक
regulator।
सेकेंड, जो नेशनल इलेक्शन
जी,
फंड
जी।
आपने बोला
जी,
कि वो होना चाहिए,
जी।
हम उस पर एग्री करते हैं। अब बात ये है कि नेशनल इलेक्शन फंड, अभी आपने जवाब दिया
जी।
कि सेस से भी हो सकता है, 1%, 0.5%, कुछ भी हो सकता है, उससे कलेक्शन हो सकता है। कॉर्पोरेट अगर अपना देना चाहे, वो कांग्रेस को देना चाहे या दूसरी पार्टी को देना चाहे, वो एट लिबर्टी है। वो जरूरी नहीं,
प्रॉब्लम है।
नहीं जरूरी नहीं सारी पार्टी को दें, वो तो मेजर नेशनल पार्टी को ही दें। कॉर्पोरेट, मैं बिग कॉर्पोरेट की बात कर, अब अडानी तो एक ही को देता है ना सर, मैं एक एग्जांपल दे रहा हूँ। सो लेट अस नॉट गेट इनटू दोस
No,
डिटेल्स। So this is first part.
Never give directly to a party because then people
Now इसके लिए, इसको मॉनिटर करने के लिए नेशनल फंड को जो सेक्रेटरी हैं, फाइनेंस का, होम का और डिफेंस का, या कोई और भी 4 जने उसको करें, बट मॉनिटर्ड बाय सुप्रीम कोर्ट जज, चाहे वो रिटायर्ड हो, कोई भी हो, एनीबडी, बिकॉज वी थिंक दे आर द बेस्ट पीपल। तो क्या ये पॉसिबल है? और दूसरा क्वेश्चन मेरा ये था कि जो पॉलिटिकल पार्टी हैं, जब हम कंपनी लॉ में जाते हैं, एक कंपनी रजिस्टर्ड करते हैं, तो हमें मेमोरेंडम ऑफ एसोसिएशन देना पड़ता है और एक आर्टिकल ऑफ एसोसिएशन देना पड़ता है और उनको कुछ फीस देनी पड़ती है। तो अगर कोई पॉलिटिकल पार्टी रिकॉग्नाइज होना चाहती है, चाहे वो नेशनल लेवल पे, रीजनल लेवल पे, हर बारी उनको ये मेमोरेंडम भी देना है और आर्टिकल भी देना है और उसको फीस भी देनी है। अगर फीस नहीं देंगे तो बाकी चीज़ें तो बेकार है, क्योंकि हम 45 क्या करेंगे, जब्त क्या कर सकते हैं? जो आपकी फीस है वही तो हम जब्त कर सकते हैं। इट्स जस्ट ए
No, I think it's a good idea. Sometime time ago, there was a condition that contributions can be made only to political parties which have inner party democracy. Don't ask me what is inner party democracy. That's a subject for another discussion. But there was a provision which said, don't discontinue. Nobody is asking that question. It is the responsibility of the Election Commission to ensure that the parties have a constitution, that parties have elections, and that parties have several other safeguards built into it. If that is in existence, every party follows that, clearly things will improve. I think elections, many parties have not held for years, for decades in fact. And you know that they come fairly close, they announce everything, but that's why I said I don't know what is inner party democracy, so don't ask me to explain that to me. As for asking the Finance Secretary, the Home Secretary and the Defense Secretary to look after that, I think they will come under more pressure than even corporates, because they're a part of the government. If they're a part of the government, and this is a large responsibility that you are actually collecting a lot of money and then deciding who will get what. Whether a Supreme Court judge supervises it or not is not material. The first step is what these three gentlemen are going to do. And I think we should not subject them. These are holders of office who are already subject to enough stresses and strains. We should not add to the problems, which is why I said retired people, sufficiently old, sufficiently credible, they should be the ones that
So I just want to reflect on the fact that when these amendments were brought in 2017,
yes.
there was no hue and cry from the companies. And we heard from the electoral bonds judgment that usually there would be a raid and then the company would go and pay, for the income tax and stuff. So on the electoral trust is something the Tatas also, have. But they have been one of the largest contributors to the ruling party. So if there is such a fund, isn't it natural it will go to the party in power? They give it to others, but the maximum contribution went to the. But I'm looking at the fact of the 7.5% versus the 2%. There was such a hue and cry about the 2% CSR. And literally nothing about the 7.5. The 2% is governed by a Schedule 7, by various laws and amendments, reporting, corporates try to get over it. But there's nothing which relates to the 7.5%, which is huge. So my question is, we are told in private by PSUs that they were all given numbers and told you pay 1,000 crores and you pay up 500 crores. They're just given figures and asked to pay up. Can legitimately a public sector do this without consultation, not only on its board, but with the shareholders, because they're public companies? So isn't it a complete contradiction? Is there any concept of corporate governance here? And to me, it reeks of complete double standards. Because you're giving away, you're a public sector company, you're sitting on publicly given donated land, you're using the country's resources, and to any political party that approaches you with a diktat, you write out a check of 1,000 crores. I mean, I've heard it from the MDs of public sector companies who have told us that this is the case. So isn't this a complete double standards, hypocrisy that governs the government? One set of rules for me, one set of rules for NGOs, one set of rules for everybody else. Does this work in public life?
I'm glad you mentioned public sector. My personal belief is that public sector should not contribute to
Exactly.
the election process. Because that money doesn't belong to any promoter, any board, any set of stakeholders. It's the government that is looking for. And just look at the way conflict plays out. Government is funding the public sector, and many of them are having losses.
Yes.
They are getting funded by the government in some way or the other.
Yeah.
With that money, you're paying a political party which is then running the government. So this is a kind of a circular argument which has conflict written all over it.
Yes.
And public sector should not be allowed to. In fact, why talk about donations to political parties? When CSR came first, if you do a study, I did some study at that time, you will find that the public sector undertakings spend a lot of their CSR money in the constituencies of the ministry charge the bills determined. So if you look at, for example, the building of toilets. Now if somebody built, I'm just taking a number out of the head, if some company was building 20,000 toilets, 18,000 of them would be in one constituency and 2,000 the rest of India. Does that make sense? So I think some of these, where the public sector is concerned, we need to draw the line and say, sorry, this is not for you. This is a game of which you should not be a part. Absolutely certain. As far as the trusts are concerned, yes, they devise their own rules, so much for the ruling party, so much for the principal opposition. Everybody else loses out, except, as I mentioned, I know in Bombay, for example, many years ago, there was one undivided party, it's divided now, where because of their strength in the unions, they were able to get money, disproportionate amounts, much larger than the seats that they had in case. So those local pressures will be there. The only way to insulate a corporate chief from pressure, because everybody knows this is a profit-making company, they're making thousands of crores profit, to straight away under pressure during election time, say, and it's not a secret, it's all in the published reports. You're making so much profit, you give me so much. The only way to do that is formula-based contributions to a trust where the distribution pattern is decided by the trust. You as a corporate chief has no role in that. No? And if somebody comes to you and says, I did not get the right portion, so don't ask me, I gave the entire money to the trust, I don't know. And in their own interest, they shouldn't even try to find out how much that money got. Of course, if the whole thing gets grossed up, then I don't know where my money is going, where your money is going. They're deciding how much to give to
It was very enlightening to listen to something which we did not know earlier, like 7.5% norm and other things. Thank you very much for that. I have 3 points of view which I would like you to make your expert comments.
Please be brief. Not
Yeah,
one
very
at a
brief.
time, otherwise I'll forget the first by the time you reach the third.
Earlier it was the license permit quota Raj, and it was the era of shortages, black marketing, and black money was generated. So quick pro quo was very easy and it was being done as a practice, everybody knows. But now it is not all that easy in WTO era. The competitive system is so much. Only very large corporate houses can have this kind of a direct favors, otherwise a normal company cannot have the favors like this, generally. Now second thing, that
Let me stop this and give a very brief answer. There's nothing to do with size. Large companies get larger favors, but it's not that small companies get less large favors. They also get, you and I don't notice, because those companies are not there in the public domain. Everyone who is not well intentioned will get something for the money that you give.
what Supreme Court did is basically the electoral bonds were to eliminate this black money component. And this was something that was leading to black economy, parallel economy. It was basically to end that kind of a black money generation and black money as a parallel economy. So this thing has been stopped by Supreme Court. So do you think it is all right or something else?
Electoral bonds? I don't think there's a problem with the electoral bonds. What the Supreme Court said was that you need to have adequate transparency in the manner in which money is given, who is getting it, that people are entitled to know. They were on the basis of what is it that the public should know as stakeholders in democracy. You can't blindside them. Therefore, the court said there's no problem with the bonds per se, but you need to build in several other safeguards. That is my reading of judgment. Of course, it's a very detailed judgment and something that I think every student of law needs to look for the analytical rigor which is gone.
Can you just pass the mic then? Get this one. Yeah, go ahead.
I just wanted to know, you talked about electoral trust. who will appoint the members of the trust?
The trust itself. Good question. The minute
Because
somebody else appoints-
because once you won't there be a competition among political parties to appoint so-called friendly?
political parties should not set up the trust.
No, I'm sure
Trust
they
should
will
be
be.
set up by a bunch of guys, let's call it the electoral college for the electoral trust, and then they will identify quickly. We can put in place systems to address that, but it should not be that a political party, now there are 7 or 8 trusts already, and you can identify them with the political parties that are influencing the trust. Does that give rise to confidence? I'm not so sure. Okay. Just one second. Then part-time, then salary.
Can you point? Go.
Yeah, just, is there a hint that the level of coercion is going up as far as expecting funds is concerned by the market? I mean, if this electoral bond is an example, is there a hint that the level of coercion is going up? How do you look at it? Thank you.
Coercion was always there. Prior to the electoral bonds, cash was being paid. Those who had the courage gave checks. There were even small amounts collected from roadside shopkeepers. That also there was an element of coercion. Somebody going and giving this, let's say you pay this, small amounts, but nevertheless not without coercion. Not that everybody happily doled out that money. It doesn't happen that way. Coercion has been there. The point is, how do you anonymize the contributions so that coercion is reduced? Supposing a party does not know where my money is going, and I am in a position to say, look, I don't know, I gave it to the trust, they have their own formula. You mentioned the Tata Trust. The Tatas have had trusts run by retired judges. So beyond the point, nobody asked them questions. There was a time in our country when nobody asked questions of judges. If you put a respectable judge across there, you would assume that it was a fair process. Yes, the ruling party got more than the others, but they had no seats. And they related it to the seats in the
But how do they do that in advanced democracy? How do they capture in US, let's say, or the
US is a bad example. But there are large number of countries that have state funding of elections, where it comes directly from the budget, the money for the elections, and that's distributed according to a formula among the political parties. We don't find these questions asked in other countries which have direct state funding of elections and distribution, because then there is no coercion, there is no corporate giving the money, there are no political parties armed twisting. None of that happens. They know how much they give. US is a bad example. US, I think, defines quid pro quo. There are 2 kinds of people who donate in the US. There are ordinary people who give $50, $100, etc. to candidates. Okay? And then there are these large checks that are written off where they meet for lunch or dinner, and then they commit each seat at a lunch table for a dinner table costs a ton of money. And then there are people who go there for photos, wanting to be seen, whatever. And that actually completely pollutes the system. The US is not a great example. And even if you look at the entire process, look at the Florida elections, how long it took. And you had the president's younger brother sitting as the governor of the state. In no self-respecting country that would have been allowed. And it took only 1 week, 10 days. In fact, there were articles in the Indian press, maybe we need to send some people to help them with counting. It was counting, at the end of the day there was nothing. Yeah.
Go ahead.
I have 2 short questions. One is, you talked about the switching off of the recording at board meetings. So, after that, I think when you say that we need the corporate's presence in these activities, I have to say that I don't really share that. We rely on the Supreme Court as the knight in shining armor to save us. so many years, since 2017, there was pin drop silence. And one of the things that I think needs to be flagged is the revolving door between the bureaucracy and the corporate houses, and which of course now is lateral entry and all is going to become worse. And a bureaucrat looks to post-retirement benefits and is therefore very favorably inclined towards certain businesses, and that's one can give a lot of examples. The other thing I would like some input on is that you've been in SEBI, so a lot of what we are talking about is really industrial capital in India, whereas financial capital is very important, and so are places like Mauritius and Cyprus and Singapore. So does that, in your view, cause a problem in policing a new electoral system?
It doesn't. I'll answer your last part of the question first. There are, in the lexicon of the International Organization of Securities Commissions, some countries, the decreasing number, it's only a few, which are called non-cooperative jurisdictions. They are the ones that have completely different set of rules, assuming they have any rules at all. And they have entities within the jurisdiction which are registered but not regulated. And there is a vast difference between registration and regulation. Now that number, as I said, is decreasing. Countries like Mauritius, etc., don't have those issues. They have subscribed to all the principles that IOSCO has set down for membership countries, and those are all member countries of International Organization of Securities Commission. Yes, there ought to be safeguards because there is no one set of rules across the world for implementing governance. When I was the chairman of the Emerging Markets Committee of IOSCO, I looked at the constitution of 80 countries, the entire population of emerging markets. Some had rules which were stricter than the US, the USA and Canada. But the market was very small. Some had very, very fundamental rudimentary kind of rules. The markets were larger. And trying to actually put all of this in one place, bring commonality, it's difficult. That is why you hear this statement that markets are international, but regulation will always be national. No nation will hand over regulation to an international body. It can at best guide it. I don't think the issue of post-retirement benefits to bureaucrat has anything to do with it. No, I'm not a believer in post-retirement benefits. I'm 77 now. 17 years since I retired, the government has not given me a job. All of what I have got from outside, and speaking for myself, I have one test. If somebody approaches me for a board position, I look at, have I dealt with this company in the previous 5 years? If I have, I don't touch that. I believe more people are doing that. I don't want to say that I am the only guy that's striking out on this. No. People are, at their own level, trying to eliminate conflicts so that we can contribute without being contributed. That I think is important.
See, this apart from the corporate funding for the political parties, now the government has, I think, opened the frontiers or paved the way for cell company coming through and funding the political parties.
What company did it?
Cell companies. There's so many. Yeah. So I think for the first time probably foreign funding is coming through such channels. So how to deal with that?
So is it coming for funding the election? Funding the political party. Or is it coming to the markets, which is a bigger possibility that money is coming into the markets at election time? That is a possibility. I don't think government has actually done anything to facilitate this. But maybe you're right, government can perhaps tighten the position that exists now, rule out this possibility. See, money is such a thing that it's like water, it will find its way. And there's no easy way to block it. You have to see what the intention of the guy who's actually driving that money. It's like a seepage in the corner of this room if it exists. It's not going to go away in a hurry. You might try and fix it easily. So get to the guy who caused the seepage and fix it. That's the answer. Seepage from there. Here. Make it brief.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to know, like, if the elections can be influenced by use of money coming from outside of India, like media can be manipulated, social media, and there is always talk of even during previous elections and elections around the world in USA or that there is foreign interference, there is interference by the manipulation of social media can be manipulated to touch Facebook, because social media plays a very important role, and the viral videos and technology can be misused. So indirectly, money, foreign influence, China is manipulating the elections everywhere. So is that happening in the present elections in India? Thank you.
It's very difficult to shut out technology. I think in the long run, the answer is the electorate must discover in its own interest that it should identify the right persons who can do the right things and will support those persons, irrespective of the money power or the technology. There's no way you'll be able to prevent technology. I'll just give you one example and then I will close. Many years ago, I used to be Joint Secretary in charge of broadcasting in the Ministry of IIC. And the debate at that time was, lots of foreign programs are coming into India, and there were members of parliament saying that, look, this is going to affect our culture and this, that, and that. So the minister, in his wisdom, set up a committee. Unfortunately, getting to all these kinds of problems, I was asked to chair that committee, knowing there are no easy solutions. 11-member committee in which 6 people wanted programs from outside to be shut. 5 people said, no, we must live in an atmosphere of openness, we should take what the rest of the world had. And I had to write one report without any dissenting opinions. Not the best report I wrote, I can tell you, but because there have been a lot of compromises, etc. But the point I'm making is, at that time, some people even said, can we use to shut out technology to prevent these foreign things leaving into it? Can't do that. Easier way is if somebody is doing it, catch him and arrest him with anti-national. More than that, you can't do it. Because technology, social media, all of these have become such a big part of our lives, unfortunately for us, that we are not in control of our situation at the moment.
Thank you. Thank you.
I think we'll close now. Thank you very much, all of you, and we'll answering these questions. But I think it's basically a work in progress. So we can't come to